think I'm recording. I'm so sorry, you guys. Just you can see that? Oh, great. All right, excellent. Not tip show. Yes, it is. Yes, you do not have to turn your camera on if you don't want to. That's totally fine, everybody. Excellent. Okay, so hello, everybody. My name is Allison Daigle. I'm the Executive Director of the Autism Alliance. Welcome. It's great to see you all this evening. I'm the moderator of this evening's guest speaker, and I'm also joined this evening by with my colleague Katie Cassavant. She'll give you guys a little shake. Um, we will be recording tonight's presentation. You may have your video on or off during this presentation. Please stay on mute when not speaking. There are two ways that you can participate. You can use your hand raising feature located under participants, and when called on, you can unmute yourself and turn on your video if you so choose. You can also use the chat feature, and we will read from those. We will take questions at the end of the presentation, and this program is scheduled from 6:30 to 7:30 this evening. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Myrese and her wonderful cat Fiona, who's sitting on her lap, who might make an appearance with us as our September guest speaker as we explore the topic of eating. Many neurodivergent individuals present with avoidant restrictive intake disorder, or ARFID, or extreme picky eating. So in this presentation, we'll unpack eating issues common to neurodivergent individuals and discuss the root causes and provide helpful tools to ensure individuals are meeting their nutritional needs. And I'm just so happy to have you here this evening, Myrese, and now I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Myrese. So let me figure out how to share my screen. Oh my goodness, I think I did it. Okay.
You did it.
Yes, practiced. But anyway, yeah, so as Allison mentioned, yeah, talking about kind of when picky eating is more than just picky eating. And the acronym that you mentioned, Allison, is ARFID. It is a new-ish diagnosis label in the eating disorder sphere, although I don't know that's the right place for it, but that's okay. It's not up to me. So here we go. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, and I just kind of thought about all these different words that I've heard parents tell me, kind of all this stuff, right? And it's feeling very like, it's hard because you see your kid, like, why don't they just eat? And a lot of times it's a lot harder than that for many reasons. We can kind of go into it. And this is kind of like how I tried to break it down a little bit, kind of like just discussing neurodiversity as a concept, kind of how selective eating or ARFID kind of and neurodiversity are kind of how they kind of do this. I do a lot of hand stuff. And sensory. Sensory is a huge component for everybody on the planet, and kind of how it might be a little bit different and cause some differences as they relate to eating. Kind of also put up some common nutrition misconceptions that I hear a lot of parents articulate and are concerned about. And then I have some ideas for books for anybody who might be curious to explore more. And then afterwards, have some time for questions for anybody. I feel like neurodiversity is kind of like this hot topic. It's been around, it's nothing new, but now people are kind of really kind of leaning into it. And I think in my work, I come at it from kind of spending time under that umbrella. And it really is just an umbrella term. It's just a difference in the way a person's brain is wired. There's nothing wrong with it. It just is. And kind of, there's this psychologist who is really passionate about kind of talking about shifting from like, this is something a person struggles with. Autism is something a person struggles with, to kind of more about like, it just is, you don't have to cure anything. I actually heard a father just today describing somebody that he knew, and his words were, this young lady suffers from autism. And it wasn't my role to challenge it. But that's how people see it. Like we need to cure it. And instead of like really welcoming it in, because it just kind of gives us a whole new perspective um, on the world. So different types of ARFID, it's very rare that a person only has one type of ARFID because they're so woven together. There's the avoidant, which is sensory based, whether it's the way something smells, the way something feels in their mouth, feels in their hands, the way, the way it looks. So that's like a sensory based avoidance. There's an aversive subtype where there's a fear of something going wrong. Person's going to get sick, they're going to choke. And so that causes that person to restrict like as much as a certain food group altogether. And then there's just those that just don't care. They eat to live versus living to they eat because they have to. Instead of really enjoying it. They don't like, this is something that's just a task. It's another chore I have to do. You know, a person can be either hyposensitive. I have people that are hyposensitive and they do a lot of hot sauce or they love crunching ice. Hypersensory people kind of prefer all the food same color. Maybe all the food is similar temperature. It's just too much overwhelm. And, I think that can really cause challenges in rigidity because food can be really hard if you don't know what you're going to expect. And a lot of times we see that. I have a lot of clients who they're very specific about the chicken nugget they'll eat. Is they know that chicken nugget's always going to taste that certain way. It's familiar. It's known. They know what to expect. And because of this limited intake or kind of leaving out entire food groups, many neurodivergent people tend to have issues with their GI system, from kind of acid reflux to bloating, constipation, diarrhea. Many factors can go into this, from, like I said, very limited intake, limited fluid intake, as well as, some foods, the pre and probiotics, like yogurt. Our stomach has bacteria within it. And if a person isn't kind of fueling or feeding that bacteria, it can cause some stomach upset. So we see that very frequently. So I know I was talking about sensory stuff. So we have our senses that everybody, taste, touch, smell, sight, and hear. They're like shared experiences. Like looking at these photographs, like you're touching grass, it's shared experience. It's outside of you. But then when we kind of go inside, right, we talk about interoception. It's like our bladder, like those somatic feelings, those digestive system, like the systems, the nervous system. And those are very personalized. Everybody's, people's experience of how they feel inside is very personalized. So we have two different kinds of systems. We have those exteroception, like those five senses, and then are these internal senses that it's going to be different for everybody. And I think these are the senses that sometimes people, it's hard to teach somebody what hunger feels like. It's hard to teach these. These are more like really deeply felt. It might not be just hunger cues. Sometimes people don't get those senses that, oh, maybe I should start looking for a bathroom. Or for me, I don't notice getting chilly until my fingers are numb. I just don't have that awareness and connection to notice that that's happening until it's already happened. So it's very personalized, and it's always different for everybody. And I think these interoceptive skills are really important to consider when exploring kind of what makes eating or the idea of food so aversive, scary, undesirable. I love this quote, and I think it really defines kind of what I'm talking about right now. And it's, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And it's our perspective. It's how we see things. And in my work, I really aim to come at the challenge usually from the child's perspective, and kind of help their parents or the parent kind of really get a perspective of this is why this might be really hard for your child, or why this might be something that's difficult or different. I think it's really important to not, in my work as a dietitian, I'm not trying to change somebody. I'm not trying to say, okay, now you don't like pizza, you're going to like pizza. I don't want to change anybody. People are perfect just the way they are, and just kind of enhancing it to make them feel like better versions of themselves, whether they feel better nourished, more energy, less brain fog. So I think that's really important, to just kind of see, just to kind of accept, or maybe have the understanding that everybody's experience is so different, even if we're looking at the same screen. These I hear a lot, not even from parents of neurodiverse children. Pretty much hear a lot of these nutrition kind of misconceptions or myths. And they're very, many people hear from pediatricians, the Academy of Pediatrics, that say, avoid juice. Like, you should not give your child juice. There's too much sugar in it. Just give them water or milk if they'll drink it. I have other parents telling me, the kid gets home from school, from the minute they walk into the house until dinner time, they're just snacking. They don't stop, and then they tell me they're not hungry for dinner. And then I also hear a lot, like, my kid lives off of carbs. So I think those are three really common ones that I get from a lot of parents. And a lot of people hear these from different places. It's pediatrician. We have the joys of social media, and kind of a lot of people inserting their own opinions as to why things might be a certain way. I think for people with sensory differences, fruits and veggies are really, really hard. You can have two blueberries that look exactly the same, but everyone is going to be different. Whereas, I love this image, but it's a Ritz cracker, a wheat thin is always going to taste the same. That McDonald's chicken nugget will always taste like that. And so that's why fruits and veggies are really hard for people with sensory differences. And if you're giving a child, say, a glass of no sugar added apple juice, the only difference between the apple juice and the apple is the lack of fiber, because they're drinking it and they're not biting through the apple. The sugar content is really pretty similar. I think what doctors might mean about limiting juice or avoiding juice is that it's much easier and faster to drink, say, 4 ounces of juice than to eat an entire apple. So that leads to kids wanting to drink more and more. And that's the only thing I can think of as to why that might be a recommendation. But people that really like things to be predictable, fruits and veggies are very difficult. And then, it's kind of, I already kind of spoke a little bit about this, about like limiting juice. And these are the things that I had mentioned. Apple juice will always taste like apple juice. An apple could be completely different from one to the other. And then I was talking about drinking juice faster than eating. And fructose, which is a fruit sugar, is found in juice and the fruit. And the only difference is the fruit will take longer and it might be more satisfying. Also, because our jaw is moving. And when the jaw moves, it kind of signals to the brain that we're consuming fuel. Liquids are a little bit different in that we might feel the liquid, but not feel the satisfaction of it, because we're not getting that fiber. My kid's never hungry for dinner. And they shouldn't eat. They can't eat 2 hours before dinner because then they're going to tell me they're not hungry. And there's this kind of line of thinking through responsive feeding that if a child is hungry, they should eat. We're working towards having the person, it's not even a child, honor their hunger, like notice it and be able to honor it. And so if the child is eating snacks because they're hungry, it would do a disservice to say you can't eat because you're not going to be hungry for dinner. I think when it comes to after school, I think having after school snacks that combine carbs and maybe protein, I have a couple of options here, will help, give the kid what they need. And then whenever dinner might be, they'll satisfy the after school hunger, but then possibly be ready for dinner. I think it's important to kind of honor the child's autonomy. We want to value their internal cues, kind of provide them with that self-confidence. Like, you're hungry, this is how you can kind of help yourself. And be curious. I love the word curious. My clients always tease me that that's my favorite word. But what I really like about the word curious is that you can never be wrong. You can't fail. So if you lean into things and kind of provide some curiosity, it can really help with exploration. Textures, food, smells, taste. These are just a few resources of books that I've kind of put together. Some are kind of, well, what I really love is the cookbook at the bottom. It is written by a chef who identifies as neurodivergent with sensory differences. And the cool thing about this cookbook is that yes, it does have recipes, but it also has like ideas and strategies. So if you don't want to follow the exact food, it gives you ideas of kind of what to look for, what's more acceptable than, say, what he's suggesting. So I really like that cookbook. It's really simplistic. It's really easy to follow and really easy to read. And then, the other books, Chloe Hayden is, they're all Devin Price. He talks about his own experience with neurodiversity. He also speaks about his eating disorders, as well as Chloe. And I probably spoke really fast, but that's kind of what I do. I am available. I am seeing clients in Framingham in person. I also see people virtual every day of the week. These are ways to reach Metro West Nutrition, ways to reach me. And like I said, I know I went through it really quickly, so please ask questions if I kind of lost people anywhere along the way.
I will unmute myself and I will ask, we have a question here. So let's see here. First question is from Liz. My kid is now 21 and has ARFID, has struggled with it since he was 2. Any ideas that can help young adults be more open to new foods? He's tried numerous feeding therapists in the past. It's a great question, Liz.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is relatable for a 21-year-old kid, a 30-year-old kid, or a 3-year-old kid. The difference with young adults is they kind of they've experienced more, whether they've been to school, whether they have a peer group, whether they play video games or connect with others, they see other things. And I think what would be important, I think, Liz, maybe is to really help kind of with curiosity, kind of like um, sometimes we don't know a new food if we don't know it exists. Sometimes feeding therapy can be really challenging because it just kind of has a fixed food that you're going to try. The work that I do is you can do things like food chaining. So I have a client who likes a certain brand of pizza, a certain brand, a certain type of pizza. So pepperoni pizza, that's Newman's Own. And my challenge to this person who's an adolescent was either maybe try a different type of pizza from the same brand, or maybe find another brand that looks very similar. So you're kind of taking some of the familiarity of the food and pairing it with something that might be unfamiliar or possibly scary. Oh, they, them pronouns. Thank you. I think really, I think it's important for the person to feel a sense of like, I'm making this decision for myself. I think it gets hard when a person who has feeding difference of any kind is told, well, you really need to eat more of this. Because I think that kind of can put pressure, and it can kind of maybe lead to some guilt or shame or feeling of doing anything wrong. So it's important to explore kind of maybe why the kid, maybe why they avoid certain foods. Is there a fear? Is it a texture based? Is it, I have a lot of people that tell me they don't like trying new foods because what if they don't like it? And that's really scary. What if I don't like it? And I think it's important to kind of validate that, yeah, that can be scary, but I think it's also important to, as you continue to learn maybe independence, and connect with others or just with yourself, is to kind of just be curious. And whether it's in food chaining, I have a client in their mid-20s, and they knew applesauce, but that was their only version of apples that they knew. And we really tried all different forms. They knew the flavor of applesauce. They knew the texture of applesauce, but not an apple or apple juice. And I think it's about really also stressing patience. You might not like it the first time. You might not like it the third or the fourth time. But I think there's some flavors, even with anybody, where you might not be super sold the first time you try it. But the more you eat it, it more it becomes, okay, this kind of can work when I have it with this, or this might taste okay with this. And so kind of that self-confidence, like, okay, I tried something, it wasn't too bad. Maybe now I'll try something else. And so it kind of is like a very slow progression, and it's really important. Patience and kind of really promoting curiosity. I think that that's really the most important. It's about kind of, what are you curious about? I've had another client, and they are very much fond of, anime or Japanese cartoons and figures and stories. And, their biggest goal was to eat rice. They just found that was a foundational Asian part of Asian cuisine, and they were really want to try rice. And we tried rice, and they discovered they didn't like it. And it wasn't even the taste of rice they didn't like. It was actually the smell. And so we all experience things really differently, and kind of just being open and kind of knowing that you might not like everything, but there might be that one thing out of 100 that you try that you've added, and that's one more thing. So I think that's really important. I think patience. Yes.
Okay. Oh, we have another question. If it's okay, I'll read the chat first and then I'll get to you, Laura, okay? So Christine has a question. As a family, we try to eat less processed foods and stick to more organic products. However, that more processed we recently learned that more processed foods, i.e. cereals, sometimes add my thing cuts off here, vitamins in the product after. Is it better to explore processed foods to add more options, or is it healthier to stick to organic foods? Oh, what a good question.
That is a really good question. I think we hear a lot about processed foods, healthy foods, organic foods. And I guess the first thing that kind of jumped out at me is this healthier. And I think it's really important to kind of move away from healthy and unhealthy. I know you didn't put unhealthy in there. Um, but I think that when we remove judgment from food, it kind of helps have a better perspective. It's kind of like everything is fine if you balance it. Yes. Ooh, did I just do that? Yes, I did. Cereals are fortified. Pasta is fortified. A lot of foods these days are fortified. It's great. Um, processed foods to add more options. I think it's important to explore kind of the processed foods by their very nature. They're always going to taste the same. I think or foods can be organic and processed at the same time. I think organic just talks about how the the vegetables or the items are grown without pesticides. I think having the vitamins added is one less thing sometimes to worry about. There are so many different kinds of cereals too. You have cereals that are like Cheerios that are whole grain, they're great. They're very bland and they're very well accepted, but they don't really like they're not very satisfying. Versus if you have a cereal like a mini wheat or a frosted mini wheat, those layers of wheat are really going to be very satisfying. And so they will be more filling. Um, and then there's always going to be drawbacks. Better to explore processed foods. I wonder if there's a way to do it all. Have kind of explore processed foods, whether it be whole wheat pasta, um, organic foods. I think sometimes organic foods could be cost prohibitive. They're generally more expensive, but I think it's, in the family group, I think kind of it's gonna, is it better to explore processed foods? So the answer to your question is yes. That's the short answer. I think it's important because the processed foods are very predictable. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily bad for you or unhealthy. Um, I liken, kind of everything fits, whether it's a carrot or if it's a candy corn because it's the season. They all can fit in a day. You just can't have all carrots. You'll turn orange, and you can't live off of vegetables. And I don't think you can live off of candy corn because it doesn't provide you with any protein or fiber. So it's kind of really important to kind of balance um, while still respecting family values. And I hope that answered your question. The short answer is yes.
That was great. Thank you. Laura, would you like to unmute and ask your question? Answer? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
Christine gave you the thumbs up, Maurice.
Thanks. Um, so my son is 4, nonverbal. I suspect he's never been officially diagnosed with ARFID, but I can pretty much say yes, he does. um,
Yeah.
so my question is, so he's very limited what he will eat. He doesn't really eat any vegetables. He has eaten bananas in the past, but then he also gets like um, food burnout
Hmm.
regularly. So I'm trying to switch between all these different things.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess my question is like, at what point would you recommend me trying to like kind of sneak like powdered probiotics into things, or like should I try vitamins? Like he won't drink anything but water. He won't even
Hmm.
try like juices because I would have loved to be able to do like smoothies, but
Hmm. Hmm.
it's very limiting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know what your recommendations for like, vitamins and probiotics might be for that.
So, um, let's see. I think the vitamin factor is kind of, if you think that he's not getting kind of what he needs and the pediatrician has kind of articulated concern, they might recommend like a multivitamin. Um, you might give it, I guess, prophylactically, like just to make sure they're getting things. I think it's important, like, would your son be agreeable with the texture of a vitamin? They have like the Flintstones vitamins, they have gummy vitamins, pills. Um, I think the idea of the probiotics is does he have stomach constipation, diarrhea? Does he have any stomach problems at this point?
It's hard to tell. Like he does have like soft stools, not to get too
Hmm.
graphic, but
Hmm.
most of the time they're pretty soft.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say like it's like diarrhea, but
Hmm.
um, I'm not sure. Like his pediatrician, I don't know if we have to switch pediatricians to be honest, because he
Okay.
doesn't know a lot about like autism and
Hmm. Um, I think you could explore probiotics and see if they help. I think it's hard with kiddos that can't really tell you if their stomach is bothering them or they have a stomach ache. Um, I have a mom that was using the Culturelle probiotics. Um, I know you said your son only drinks water. Um, Sometimes you can put, I don't know what other foods he might eat. You can mix it with other foods, the probiotics. But I think that would be definitely a really specific to your son, and I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. And kind of get I think I would need a little bit more information when it comes to probiotics, that is. And I think what's really hard too, and kind of not just to Laura's question, is that every person is so different and there's no one way, there's no one, there are not two people with ARFID that are the same. And so sometimes the more information, it's just a little bit better for me to um, kind of support you specifically. But are you back with us, Laura?
She is. Yeah, she dropped off. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So I don't know how much you got and how much you missed.
sorry about that. Yeah, my computer died like right as I was talking.
Always, always.
Uh, yeah, so I don't know if you had started kind of explaining already, but yeah, the pediatrician basically, when I brought up concerns, he said he's not worried because he's still gaining weight. So for him, he's just like, well, on the chart, he looks okay. Um, and when I've kind of talked about like, what should be my next steps, like, a nutritionist, a gastroenterologist, like what I don't know what the next steps are, and he's not very
Mhm.
helpful with like kind of saying we think you should do that.
Yeah,
And I don't know if I need to or not, because
yeah. Um, I think, yeah, I think it's difficult when you feel like you're teaching your pediatrician, especially if it's not a receptive education. But our bodies are very resilient. Your son could be growing and developing on his growth chart just fine until maybe he isn't. Or he might be getting the calories that he needs, but is he getting kind of enough for his body to get like protein and those things? And like I had mentioned earlier, it is very common among neurodivergent people to have GI issues. I think that if your son is progressing along their growth chart, and you're not noticing overt distress, a GI might not be necessary right now. I think I think I had meant, and I had mentioned, I don't know where you caught me or not, but I would be happy to speak with you kind of after or at a different time because it's very specific and I need to know a little bit more information before giving you just a blanket recommendation. I wanted to know a little bit more about him first.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because yeah, I was trying not to be too specific about it, but
No, yeah, and I
it is
just, yeah,
hard.
no, and that's fine, and I respect that, and but I do want to be able to give you a more solid, defined answer. So I will be available if you would like to ask that question
Okay, thank
in
you.
more, in greater detail. Yeah.
Right.
I think it's also really hard, two of the links here are social media related, and I think there's a lot of information everywhere. And sometimes it gets really confusing and it's hard to discern, well, do I trust this? Or they're saying that I should do this or this. And I think that it's really important to get your information from the right source. Just like you wouldn't go to a cardiologist if you broke your ankle. So kind of with all this messaging on social media, I think it's really important to get information from the people that the right source. Go to places that are reputable.
So we have a question from Julie. If you suspect a kid is struggling with this, what would be the process for pursuing a diagnosis?
Are you talking about it? If you're talking about an ARFID diagnosis, um, it could be, depending on how old the person is, the child or whomever, it could be a referral if it's a pediatrician to a dietitian. As a dietitian, I'm not allowed to officially diagnose, which doesn't really make sense, but I would, in that situation, if I thought that this person kind of needed some support around eating and feeding, I would have a conversation with either the PCP or the pediatrician. And once I get their blessing, their sign off, then it's more working with the family into how to support this person get to a place where they're adequately fueled and nourished. So I guess, the reason why you'd want maybe a formal diagnosis is for insurance purposes. It's not like you wouldn't do like a neuropsych eval. It would really just be kind of either a referral from a pediatrician to a dietitian or the dietitian. I've called pediatricians many times and kind of saying, this is what I'm seeing. Do you support this diagnosis? Pediatricians are always all too happy to pawn it off on somebody else. And I'm always willing to take it. Yeah, insurance. Gotta love insurance. Insurance usually requires a diagnosis, yeah. Depending on what insurance you have.
Could I just wanted to share a little quick story, Myrese? Would that be okay? Just a quick
Please,
one.
please. Yeah,
So I'm interested in this topic from a personal perspective as well as professional
yeah.
for all of you. But when my son was really young, he was about 3, and he had all of these characteristics that you described. and I didn't know what to do. So I reached out to a nutritionist and I did a 3-day intake and what he eats. And then I sent it back to her. This was all via email back in the
Oh,
day.
yeah, yeah.
And she sent me and she said it would be good if you could get some more protein in him. You could eat more protein and vitamin C. And that was so valuable to my husband and I because it gave us a place to focus. So then we kind of
Mm.
focused in on the orange juice, and at the time it was taco meat that we had been offering, and he, on the table, and he wouldn't eat it. And then one night it sat there, and we left it, and then he came back and he ate it. And so, but just that's the example because I just remember feeling really anxious about it, and that really
Hmm.
relieved that burden that I felt because I felt successful that we were able to at least focus and got these two areas. And that's kind of how I pursued things from that point is
Yeah.
this is okay. We were able to get these. So I just want to share that with everybody because it can be a really
Yeah.
lonely
I
place when your
think,
child's
yes,
young.
it's very isolating. And I think also just to your point, Allison, is that protein is typically very hard. It involves a lot of chewing, um, cutting, chewing. It's usually kind of a stronger flavor. So it's very common for protein to be a challenge, and kind of that's where we kind of explore, okay, well, if your child can't eat chicken, okay, what are some things that they do like, and how do we infuse things into it without changing too much what they eat? I love the orange juice that you bring up because there's also calcium fortified orange juice. So if you have a child that's really not into dairy, but they'll drink OJ, um, that is something that is now available. Um, yes, sorry. I don't know if I should be looking at the comments, but maybe I shouldn't. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad that was really helpful for you in kind of giving you kind of like where to focus. I also, to that point, sometimes I have parents tell me my kid's just not eating enough variety. And when we come down to it, we talk about what they exactly are eating. They're getting all the variety that they need. We don't need a child that's going to be like eating squid or, sushi or whatever. Like as long as they're getting what they need, it might not look as pretty or colorful or whatever. So I think that that's important too. A variety, my variety might look different than Allison's variety, but as long as we're getting what our bodies need, they can both be fine.
Alexa just wanted to say, just to add, AFRID, on top of being able to be diagnosed by a PCP and pediatrician, it can also be diagnosed by a mental health provider as it is classified under eating disorders in the DSM. Hope that is helpful. Yes, it is.
Thanks, Alexa. Yes, thank you, Laura. Yeah, so if you, yeah,
Great.
yeah. And also kind of something that came up and when we talk about like selective eating. Um, There are many times when a trip to the dentist is really difficult, right? It's not even that putting food in the mouth, it's putting something else in your mouth. I have several clients where they can't use a toothbrush. There's just too many. It's a sensory overload. So I think that's also important to consider if there's a person who's having a really hard time getting a variety. I will usually ask kind of, if they're able to get to the dentist, how is teeth brushing? Do you remember to brush your teeth? Some people with ADHD or, other profiles have a hard time remembering just the basics, right? And so we can't expect them to eat a bunch of food if, you know, remembering to shower, to brush your teeth, and those kind of things aren't need to be met first. And I think that's also really important is making sure that those foundational needs are also considered as well. Hi, Christine.
Hi, I'm wondering if I could double dip.
Please. It's
Okay.
all good. It's all
Uh,
good.
um, um, I've noticed with our daughter another kind of pattern that she falls into is that she really likes something for like a good like 2 months, and that's the only thing she'll eat. So
Mhm.
smoothies were all she ate for a little bit, or ravioli is the only thing she'll ask for, or I guess like I don't know. It kind of has
Yeah.
we have these waves,
Yes.
and I wish I wonder if you can speak on that.
Yeah. Right. So those jags, those food jags, they're predictable, they're known. But then it comes to a point where the person is like, I never want to see that ever again. And then it's difficult because if a person is already selective in what they're eating, if they're cutting something completely out, then it's like, oh my gosh, we're missing this whole thing. And I wonder kind of in those situations, like you brought up a smoothie, and I wonder, you know, if say your daughter's in like the smoothie kick or whatever, can we pull out some of the components of the smoothie and sample them? If you're using milk or yogurt, can put it on the side and kind of look at the different components. Because even if, say, you're putting strawberries in the smoothie, um, if your daughter was willing to take a bite of a strawberry, that's a huge exposure, and that can kind of lead into other things. And maybe she wants the smoothie to be a different flavor. So I think sometimes breaking things into components can be a helpful way of chaining into something else. Um, I brings to mind. So yeah, I think kind of that would be something that I would consider, or like I have a kid that only eats mac and cheese. And sometimes kind of depending on how old the child or the person is and how aware they are of what they're eating. Um, you know, the smoothie idea, I would consider maybe breaking things up and kind of exploring different pieces of it. Um, if it was mac and cheese, maybe discussing trying a different shape of pasta. Um, the Annie's bunnies are really popular right now. They make those mac and cheese in lots of shapes. So maybe it's like, oh, let's try princess shapes tonight instead of the bunnies. Or you can put bunnies next to the princesses and they can do like a taste test. It also depends on how old they are. Um, I think sometimes if they're on those jags, it gets hard because you never know when it's going to end. So having some backups, maybe it's not going to be the one thing that's going to kind of carry them, but at least it'll be something that you can kind of then go hook from. Um, you know, like I said, I'm not sure what was in those smoothies, but that just kind of was something that I jumped onto because maybe you use a vanilla yogurt. Like, hey, you want to try some on the side? This is what we're going to put in your smoothie, or things like that. Um, so kind of working to maybe separate them or chain from something that's known. Um, Doritos is something else that I hear a lot of, to maybe a different cheese flavored tortilla or just a plain tortilla without the cheese on it, and kind of really validating that that could be really scary and overwhelming, but doing it in a very playful way can just kind of help with some of that overwhelm and that fear, because it's predictable, it's known, so it makes sense. They don't have to think about it because they know what it's going to be, but inevitably they're never going to want to see it again, and that makes it really scary and hard when they're so limited already. I hope that helped. If you want to dip again, that's totally fine.
Thank you.
I know school can be hard sometimes because of what they allow in school and what they don't allow in school. Oh, thanks, Megan.
Just one more thing I want to say. The other thing that surprised me as my child grew up was the impact on other people. So, I'm the person who's the mom, and so I feel like again a lot of those emotions of just wanting to him to be able to have a variety and feeling some shame around certain eating patterns or whatever. But then other people that came into his life had success with other foods that I didn't. And so I always welcomed that in. And I remember this one teacher, she ate a grapefruit every day and she ate it for a year. And every day she brought a grapefruit to school and he was exposed to it. And finally, one day he took the grapefruit and he grabbed, took it from her and he put his tongue on it
Yeah.
for the first time. And long story short, he eats grapefruit now. So it was a year of being exposed to the smell, watching her eat it, the whole thing. And I love that story. And I do still refer to that teacher as Mrs. Grapefruit because that was such an eye-opening thing for me that, again, I don't want to say being patient, but patient is a huge piece of it. And you just don't know what's around the corner and who is going to be, where your child will be exposed to something that might just be, food that you never would have thought of. So.
Right, and if he hadn't been exposed to Mrs. Grapefruit, he didn't, what may never have known that grapefruits exist.
Right. Because
Right,
I
so
don't
it's
eat grapefruit. Right, because I don't eat grapefruit. So,
right, so that's, kind of, those can be sometimes great experiences for kids and adults alike. Like I've heard so many people say, oh, I tried that so-and-so restaurant, it was great, or don't even bother kind of thing. I mean, adults do it as well.
yeah.
You know, kids they can be very receptive.
Yeah.
Alara, hi.
Hi, I'm hoping this is not too specific to it. I know we'll talk after, but um like if there's so like with the phases that he kind of goes through, um how worried should I be about like I know we don't like calling them bad foods, but like
Mhm.
right now he's obsessed with hot dogs. And like
Mhm.
that's basically his main source of protein.
Mhm.
And I just hear so many bad things about like hot dogs with cholesterol and like being processed. And it's like, okay, when should I be worried? And like donuts, like he really likes like sweet type foods.
Mhm.
And because he's so little, I feel like I don't have to worry as much, but I don't know.
Yeah, so kind of, you know, the hot dog, we hear it's processed, it's so high in sodium, it's all bad. Don't do hot dogs are the worst food you can possibly have. On the flip side, hot dog is protein. Hot dog is meat. Um, there's nothing wrong with a hot dog. Um, I feel like, I've had a parent tell me, because I will say if your child will drink milk mixed with chocolate and they won't drink white milk, give them chocolate milk. Yes, they're getting more sugar, but they're also getting calcium and protein and vitamins and stuff. So if he eats hot dogs, he's getting good protein. Hot dogs are salty and the donuts are sweet. So I wonder if your son kind of he needs more feedback in order for him to feel like food is worth eating. Um, and so that saltiness, that sweet, might be what really kind of is almost like a motivator. It's giving him the feedback that his body needs from a sensory level, from a sensory perspective.
That's an interesting way to think of it. Thank you.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm all for chocolate milk. Although I have one kid that doesn't like chocolate. He's 6 and he doesn't like chocolate, but he likes strawberry milk. So that's what we do.
Could I say one more thing? So,
You don't have to ask.
when my son, well, I want to, this is to you, Laura. So when my son was younger, he used to lick the Play-Doh, And so one day I licked the Play-Doh and it was salty. So I gave him pretzels and he stopped licking the Play-Doh. So he wanted something salty, I'm assuming, but that was so just thinking about you, Laura, is that he likes the sodium or if he likes the taste of salt, there are some I know there's some organic cereals. There's one particular brand I know at Whole Foods that I've tried, and it was very salty. It had a salt to it, and it was like, but it's so even something as simple as like that might be a different food, but it might have that. Um, he might be liking that, like you said, that strong flavor, which I never realized. Maurice,
Yeah,
to
they need
said it
that. Yeah,
now.
people need that
Yeah. That
feedback.
feedback, yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Like for
Yeah,
me,
that
I
makes a lot
always
of
have
sense.
something in my hands. I always have something in my hands.
mhm,
Because that's grounding for me.
mhm.
Other people, yeah, like I said, I've had people that just need to bite ice. They need that in their mouth. They need that frozen shock, and it just they're grounding.
One other thing he used to do, when in the wintertime and people ice their put salt on the
Hmm.
ice, he would take it and try to lick the salt from the
Hmm.
bottom of his shoe. Again,
Yeah,
another just to your point, Laura, about the
right.
salt. So and now see it all kind of comes together for me. I mean, the Play-Doh one
Hmm.
I just
Yeah,
didn't think about, but really thinking about it is that was something that he liked that he had a
yeah. You need that
propensity for that
feedback,
feedback.
but also developmentally appropriate that your child tasted Play-Doh, right? So
Yes.
it's not a bad thing. I mean, kids are
Right.
exploring with their mouth the same
Right.
way they're exploring with
Right.
everything
Right.
else.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because I mean, he likes his snack type foods, like a lot of chips and
yeah,
goldfish, of course.
yep.
Which
Salty,
yeah, I didn't
crunchy.
really
Yep.
think. Yeah, the salt. And even hot dogs can be crunchy. Like that might be part of it too, is the kind of
There's
crunch
some, there's a
factor.
tension. Yeah, there's a tension to biting into the hot dog, like that casing, and
Hmm.
it involves some energy. Yeah. But
Mhm.
yeah, salty, crunchy, goldfish.
Yeah.
I actually tried the rainbow goldfish for the first time. They're very different. I don't know if anybody else has explored that before. Rainbow goldfish do not taste like the real ones.
I
You
think
don't
they
think
taste the
so?
same.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
My
how,
son has
yeah, I
done
mean,
both. He'll switch.
oh, really, Megan? Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of other things, but yeah, frosting. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we have
But
about
I think,
a couple more minutes
yeah,
left. Sorry. Yep. Mhm.
no, I was going to say, I think we live in an age where we have so much more variety for some one thing. I mean, there's like a whole aisle for yogurt these days, and it can be a great way to explore different textures, different sensory experiences. Um, to things so you don't it's like if you don't like Yoplait yogurt, it doesn't matter, there's so many other yogurts you can try. And I think kind of taking advantage of all the availability that we have in this now, I guess, kind of different kinds of bread, different, I just think of yogurt as kind of like, if you don't like one, you can go to many others. I can't stand Greek yogurt. It just, the texture just creeps me out, but there's plenty of other yogurts that I can have. Um, so yeah, so kind of, I think that's what makes it kind of cool, is that there's so many ways to explore the same thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Maurice. This has been
Thank
wonderful. This
you.
was a really great Q&A, and I really appreciate this was a great group. Thank you all for being here this evening. And you have Maurice's information there on this last slide. So if you want to get in contact with her, you know where that is. And again, thank you all for being here and look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
everybody.
evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Or Laura, are you going to stay on? Oh yeah. Are you?
Yeah, if you
Okay,
don't
good.
mind
Okay,
staying
good.
on
No,
a
I
little
wasn't
longer.
sure.
I wasn't sure what I didn't want to.
I have 12 pounds of feline on my lap. I'm not